In today's episode, we talk about why good management is critical to a high-performing team. So I recently read the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, and it was an eye-opening and challenging look at what good leadership looks like and how critical it is to the performance of any team. I think this is something that we all believe, but we rarely get tangible examples of how leadership directly impacts a team. And that's because leaders are generally very good at deflecting. However, through his extensive experience in the Army and his work with Echelon Front, Jocko has got some terrific leadership examples and how they play a direct role in the performance of the team. So I first want to highlight one of the most impactful leadership examples I read in the book, and then examine it to find out what it tells us about management and leadership and what's critical for our role. As a side note to all the managers who are reading this blog, I highly encourage you to remember the magnitude of your position and pick up Extreme Ownership. It is a great book. I highly recommend it. So before we get into it, I will say that in the blog, in the notes, there is a link where you can read the entire excerpt of this book. I didn't think I would read it out to you or type it up, but if you do want to read it, you can go there. But for those who don't click there, I'll give you the highlights, the things that are critical to the story. So during Hell Week, in the tryouts for the Marines, there was a drill where 7 teams were taken to a beach and given a task. They were required to basically pick up a raft together, run it to the ocean, and then bring it back. The team that arrived back first was allowed to sit out in the next run of the trial. The team that was, that placed in last actually had to endure further punishment. Now, each of the teams was given a squad leader. That squad leader would be given the rules of engagement of how they should be carrying the raft, ending, and then coming back to the finish line, and they had to relay that information back to their teams. Now, throughout repetitions of these trials, it became clear that 2 teams were standing out. Team 2 was outshining the competition, winning almost every race, and Team 6 stood out by placing last in almost every race. And to make matters worse, their repeated placement in last was subjecting them to brutal punishments. Basically, they had to endure like bear crawls in the sand or holding a position for a while, and that took them even further to the point of exhaustion and humiliation. Then one of the petty officers suggested, why don't we switch the leaders for those 2 squads? He swapped Team 2 and Team 6 leaders, but left their teams the same. You can imagine both of them had mixed feelings. Team 6 obviously thrilled that he can take over a high-performing team, and Team 2, that squad leader not so happy. So, what happened? Honestly, I'm still in a little bit of disbelief reading what happened. But as the challenge was started, the teams went off, and something was clearly different. As the teams charged back towards the finish line, there were 2 teams that were leading the pack. Team 2, and you guessed it, Team 6. Team 6 was the one that was consistently losing. And by the time they crossed the finish line, Team 6 was the winner. Let that sink in for a second. All the variables kept the same. Team 6 is brutalized. They are tired, and they have been just subjected to constant exercise, even while the other teams were resting. And at this trial, the change of the leader led them to victory. That is crazy. So what does that tell us? Good teams could be good based on talent of the team or the talent of the leader. But bad teams are bad because of leaders. So let's take a look at that, right? Team 6 was an objectively bad team. You switched the leader, and that team became a winning team. Team 2 was a good team to begin with. You switched the leader, and they still stayed performing, right? It wasn't that Team 2 now became last. Team 2 still held together and got to the finish line ahead of the other teams. But they didn't win, right? So they were still very competitive. They were still high performing. But obviously Team 6 outplayed them. So that means that good teams could be good based on the players and the cohesiveness of the players, the team that's making, sitting under the leadership. But bad teams are so directly correlated to bad leaders. That reality places an extremely heavy weight on the shoulders of the leaders who have to lead teams. They have to rise to the occasion and bring out the best in those who report to them. So what are 3 things that managers can do to bring out the best in their teams? In my opinion, those 3 things are eliminate conflict, motivate the team, and get in the weeds. In the story of extreme leadership, we saw that the team who was consistently losing started bickering and blaming each other for poor performance. When teams look inward instead of outward for conflict, they'll be sure to turn selfish and inevitably leave the team. Small, subtle comments could snowball into something far more destructive. And while I don't advocate for making a big deal out of every little thing, it is important to reinforce the idea that the competition is not within the team, but outside of it. So managers need to focus on that, eliminating conflict between team members. We have to consistently remind and encourage the team that they are working together to beat competition. Next, managers have to motivate their team. There comes a time in every employee's day when they just get burnt out. There's a lot going on, there's too many problems, the project's too long, or it's just plain uninteresting work. And that could all those different things can lead employees to not wanting to perform at their peak. At this point, it's a manager's duty to understand not only what the employee is doing, but why the employee is working. It's not just about the stuff that's happening in their work life, but think about the employee as a whole. Think about what's not working and try to help them address it. Try to talk directly to them and say, hey, something's going on. Let's talk about your performance. Keeping employees motivated and engaged is critical to helping them achieve their greatest potential, and in turn, helping your team do the same. You really need to get to the bottom of why your employees want to come to work and use those things to motivate them. If you want to learn more about how to motivate your team, you can check out a previous article I did. It's also linked in the blog and in the post below. I think that's a great way to really get your team to want to bring their best because they know they're being taken care of. They want to be able to take care of the team. Now, lastly, get in the weeds. There's no greater show of leadership than getting in the weeds with the team and caring about their work. I see too many times that managers have their eyes fixed on the next position they're looking for, and they only care about looking good instead of actually helping the team get over their hurdles and delivering, right? They think about their next strategic move upward rather than paying close attention to what their employees are doing. Managers should be intimately acquainted not only with what their employees are doing, but care enough to want them to succeed. I would argue that you should want their success more than you want your own success. When leaders put their employees first, employees get that. It becomes very clear, and you set a good example for the rest of your team. That 100% does not mean micromanagement, though. You have to be able to give your team the leeway to do what they want to do because they're ultimately the people who are executing on the tasks. You didn't hire them so that you could just tell them everything. You wanted intelligent people to tell you what's best and help you make informed decisions on what to move forward. And I would argue that you should let your teams make a lot of tactical decisions on how to execute on their projects. If you're constantly telling them, no, you shouldn't do that, that's not the way this should be handled, you're basically handicapping them or handcuffing them into being able to develop their ability to critically think and to think strategically. That ultimately will help them get to the next level. So I'll say it again. I think managers should care about the success of their employees rather than their own success. Now, you can argue and say that bad teams are bad because of their lack of talent. But look at your own career. Your ability probably hasn't changed all that much. You had some innate direct skill, but your job and what you're directed to do or what you should be doing is directly tied to who you work for. You could get bad direction or you could get good direction. Haven't the times that you've excelled been under good managers? rather than bad managers who completely stifle people. Bad managers can have you chasing pointless tasks, moving in wrong directions, giving bad advice, and withholding valuable feedback. If you're an employee, then hold your managers to a high standard. And if you're a manager, wear that responsibility with humility and honor. And remember that it's up to you to keep the team performing at a high level. And ultimately, that's what extreme ownership is about. It's about leaders taking responsibility for the performance of their team, regardless of how good or bad it is. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay proper.